Hello, good morning, greetings. I'm Will Lesh. Welcome to Tippy Canoe Boats. This section will cover the rigging for your T37, also for the T39. There are some very minor differences just in putting the mast together, but the booms are exactly the same, and so everything you hear here will be great for both the rigging on the T37 and the T39. So welcome, and let's get started. First we have the 1/16 inch stainless steel rod. This is 316 stainless steel. It can be immersed in salt water virtually forever with no signs of any rust or deterioration. So 316 is always the best choice. Interestingly enough, 316 is usually non-magnetic, and so you can test stainless steel. You can test all your silverware at home to see how high grade it is. If it's non-magnetic, it's probably 316. If it's magnetic, then it's probably 304 or 308, which will, on a boat, if you wash your silverware in salt water, 304 and 308 will gradually get some little rust pits in it, whereas 316 will stay perfect forever. Okay, so starting off, we just cut off the flat end of the rod. If you try to work with that, it just snaps. It doesn't work well. So just snip off the last very little bit. We're going to start with making the gooseneck fitting. In my set of instructions, it's page 49, step number 2. And there are two ways to do this. One, you can wrap it around a drill bit of the as the instructions indicate, or you can just take the needle nose pliers and make it manually, which is what I'll do right now. This is the gooseneck fitting, so it's just a loop about a 1/4 inch diameter, and so just start right at the tip and bending it, thinking how much radius you want, and just keep working around, bending it. Here I can lean in a little bit so you can see, and I've got a mast here to fit it to. That's going to be too big a radius, if you can see that, so I'm going to go back to the beginning and tighten it up a little bit. Okay, with a little twisting there, and just little bends, a little bit, and try to keep it an even circle. And we're getting closer to the right radius. And let's try that on the mast. It's not a full loop yet. You can see it's just most of the way around, but not all the way around. So I'll test it, and it's getting close. It's a little bit loose still, not as tight as we need it to be. So I'm going to tighten it up just by grabbing the tip and bending it around. Yeah, that's a little bit closer to the right diameter. Let's see if it's still big enough. It's still big enough, and really good fit now. That's really pretty much tight enough. It could go a little bit tighter. We don't want it to be crimping tight on the, we don't want to be squeezing the mast tight, because then it won't spin around it. Okay, so just closing up the loop there. Now we have a closed loop. Almost need something so you can see that better. So now we have a closed loop there. And let's try that on the mast. If necessary, we can open it up a little bit, but no, that's still a really good fit there. That's pretty much tight enough. So we'll finalize that by seeing if we can squeeze the loop totally closed here. That may have made it too tight for the mast, so we might have to open that up. We'll see. Okay. Oh, just a little bit tight. So close. Well, it'll fit on, but we don't want it that tight. See, that's really not going to spin around easily. So we'll open that up a little bit, and we'll have it. Actually, first, before I open it up, I'll open it up a little bit. Bend this around. Okay, now you see how it's coming out. Sort of at an angle. we want it to look like a wand for blowing bubbles. Those you know, are straight pieces that intersect the loop at a 90-degree angle. So we're going to grab the just inside the loop there, like that, and bend it back and out. And now we've got the look of the blowing bubble wand with the straight piece coming into the loop at relatively a 90-degree angle, and a nice fit on it. So you can tighten it up and then you can loosen it too. So if you get too, so I keep doing that. You tighten up just a little bit more. See if we got it just right now. Oh, that's perfect. So that's just a really nice fit. It's on there tight, but it spins easily. Okay, so that's pretty easy. Just a regular set of needle nose pliers. You do want needle nose pliers that have teeth inside the jaws. If it's just smooth inside the jaws, you can't grip the thing, and it's just, you won't ever get it right. You won't ever be able to do it. Okay, so that's our first stainless steel piece, and that went really well. And then that's going to be cut off. That slides into the end of the main boom. Clip off the rod, straight part of the rod coming from the loop at a distance of 1 1/4 inches from the loop. My finger is 1 inch to the first joint, and 1 1/4 be about here, and we'll clip it right off there. You just want it long enough it's not going to fall out of the boom. Okay, and then it says to crimp it three different places. So you can glue it into the, so the epoxy will have something mechanical to grab onto. So with these clippers, it'd be pretty easy to cut right through it, and that's not what I want. I just want little kind of crimp, and I don't want to bend it dramatically because it won't go into the boom. So those are just, you probably can't even see those, but they're just little dents in the rod. And I was being careful not to cut it all the way through because I didn't want to do that. Okay, now starting the boom bang fitting. Let's make the boom bang. Now the boom bang's going to be a little different because if we have this on the mast, and this we learned from experience, if we have this sort of loop on the mast, at the bottom of the mast, occasionally the jib sheet can flip around behind the mast in, when the sail's luffing, and it sort of seems like it would be impossible, but it's happened. It can get right in the groove, in the gap there, and get inside the loop, and then the jib won't sheet in correctly anymore. So rather than make a loop like this, we're going to make a loop that comes around and then comes up parallel, and then we're going to put a clear heat shrink piece of tubing onto the main one, and catch the end of the one that's coming up. So you'll see that in a minute. So so rather than start at the end making a loop, we're going to start in part way. And again, I think it tells you can do this on a drill bit with a vise, but you can also do it with the needle nose pliers, probably just as easily. Okay, so we need to make a loop, and that will be a little ways. It doesn't really matter how far in it is. I think in the instructions we tell you about 1 inch from the end, to have the loop about 1 inch from the end, but one of the pictures probably, I think, has it farther in from the end. So this is maybe even easier to make the loop in the middle, I don't know. It's not really very difficult. So again, just making little incremental bends. That's a bit wider than what we want, so we'll tighten that up a little bit by grabbing it out here and bending it all around. That's making a nice loop. Looking good. Try it again. Well, that's just a little bit tight, but I think that's because it's not an exact. exactly even loop, so we can squeeze it a little bit. Now let's stick with the needle nose because that's what you're using. That's going to be too tight now. Okay, so now we have a nice circle, but it's too tight for the mast, so we'll open that up a little bit again. And there we have it, perfect. Okay, so pretty easy to do. And now we want this arm to be parallel to this main part of the thing, so we'll grab it right here and then bend that arm. I don't know, you can't see it there. Just pushing it against the wood to bend it parallel. Okay, and we're almost there. Oh, maybe I bent it too far. We want to bend both. Again, we want the arms coming into the loop at a 90-degree angle. So now I'm bending the main part of the rod. And I did bend that first one too far, so bend it back. And there. Now we have the two arms coming into the pops, you know, we have the two arms coming into the loop at a 90-degree angle, and the two arms are parallel to each other, lined up. And let's test that again, see if we, oh, that's perfect. Yeah, really nice. Okay, so fairly easy. It might take you a couple of tries, but it's not too hard to do. And yeah, that'll work fine. I'm going to get these just a little bit. They weren't quite, one was a little higher than the other, still is. So I want to twist it down without messing up my loop, then bend it back up. Okay. Now the loop is pretty level. So you can see it better with the block behind it. The loop is pretty level like that. And the heat shrink tubing will hold these two parts together here. And so good job. Now, how long does it go? The other end's a little trickier, but now that you're an expert at bending steel, you know, this light steel rod, it'll go fine. Okay. How far do we cut that off at? Okay, the rod coming out of the loop should be at least 6 inches long. So let's, actually, this is 8 inches. My full extent of my fingers is 8 inches. So this would be probably about 6 inches here. And that should be more than adequate. I'll leave a little extra. Okay. And cut that out. Okay, so here's the start of our boomerang rod. And I don't think we put the tubing on yet. Although probably any time is fine. And again, it fits just right. Oh, last thing on the boom bang is we have it coming off at a bit of an angle, but that's not enough of an angle to slope up to the boom. So we're going to put more angle on it there. Just grabbing it here and bending up on both of those. That's maybe a little much. Stainless steel is nice because you can bend it multiple times and bend it back and it tends to do fine. So now we have it coming up, so it's coming from the base of the mast up to the boom at approximately the right angle. Might be maybe just a little bit more bend. Okay, that's very good. That's good. We can fine tune that later. So yeah, that's a good angle for the boom bang. Okay, super. Okay. Oh yeah, it does. We do the heat shrink now. So that's I have a piece of it right here. That clear stuff is so hard to see. Here it is. Just that 1-inch piece of heat shrink tubing. And that's going to slide on the main piece and over the end. If you slid it way down, your jib sheet would possibly get here and catch. So we're going to capture the end of the short piece in the middle of the heat shrink tubing. Now, if you do this heat shrink tubing I just gotta get the grab the heat gun. If you do the heat shrink tubing without holding those two pieces together, it's actually it's not going to pull them together. So we'll hold them together with the pliers. We can't hold them together with our fingers because it'll get too hot. So we'll hold them together. There we are. Sorry, I didn't have that ready. We'll have to hold the two pieces together with the needle nose pliers. Here. Oopsie, it's a little tricky. Okay, there. So they're touching, and then the heat shrink tubing will hold them. It just won't, once it cools, it'll hold them fine. Oh, you have to make sure I don't blow that off at the last minute. I don't want to heat the camera up too much. Okay, here it goes. Starting to shrink. The heat gun is the easiest way. You can use a little pocket torch or a cigarette lighter or a match even, or do it over your stove burner. But there's nothing much easier than the heat gun. Okay. Now don't let it go right away while it's still hot. Remember, you've got that stainless steel really hot too. So it's going to take a little time to cool. Okay. And this would be a bad time for your pliers to slip off. Okay, that should do it. Turn the heat gun off. There we go. Okay, so keep holding it until you know it's cool. I've let it go too soon several times, and the spring of the steel spreads it apart again. Okay, and remember, if you're using a heat gun, that tip is the end of the heat gun is super hot. If you put it down against something, it's going to burn it or melt something. So be careful. It's still pretty hot. I think it's too hot still. Letting it go too soon is a mistake. Okay, well that should be pretty good. Okay, as soon as I let it go, it's going to go. It'll be too soon. Okay, that's good. Okay, so now you have the start of your boom bang fitting. Put it against this nice cedar block, and you can see the heat shrink tubing is holding those two legs together, and the short leg ends right in the middle of the heat shrink tubing, right about here. Okay, well that was fun, easy. Let's set that aside so we don't lose it, and we now have our mast gooseneck. The gooseneck is the piece that holds the boom to the mast and pivots around the mast. Also has a little bit of ability to pivot up and down, not dramatically, but it doesn't need very much scope to pivot up and down. It's mostly just pivoting around the mast. And the boom vang, which pivots around the mast as well. The advantage of a solid boom vang is you can use it to hold the boom up very slightly in very light air. Usually the boom vang is its primary purpose is to hold the boom down so the boom doesn't lift way up and let the sail billow out into an inefficient shape. Okay, now moving on to the next part of the instructions. Now we're supposed to glue the collar on the mast. Here's our mast, 44.5 inches. Oh, here, this is one place that the T37 and T39 do divulge in the mast. It's actually the only place, really, in what we're doing today, until we start measuring for the forestay, the screw eye in the top of the mast for the forestay. But the T39 mast is a continuous piece. The T37 mast is sleeved together, but there's not much difference between the two systems. Okay, so now the mast sleeve, the mast is going to go together like this. Here's our gooseneck piece. here we have the 1/2-inch mast collar. Then we'll have the gooseneck stainless steel loop that we just made. And then we will have the mast joining sleeve, which is 1 7/8 inches long. And then we'll have the 4-inch mast extension tube, which is the same diameter as the mast. And then we'll have the boom vang. And you can see the mast extension tube does two things. I guess I can just hang down. The mast extension, or the mast joining sleeve, does two things. It joins two sections of mast together, and it also separates the boom vang from the gooseneck. If you didn't have the mast joining sleeve there, the boom vang would slide up the mast and it wouldn't hold the boom down anymore. And the gooseneck would fall down the mast and it wouldn't work correctly. So it's important to have that mast joining sleeve between the two, and it's important to have the loop on the boom vang and the loop on the gooseneck fit the mast closely enough that they can't slide up and over the mast joining sleeve or the mast collar. Okay, so now we just have to glue those two sleeves in place, and we have to make sure that these the boom gooseneck loop is in place between the two sleeves. The instructions tell us to wrap a piece of blue tape around the mast at a point 1 7/16 inches up from the base of the mast on the long mast section. So, and 1 7/16 is just 1/16 of an inch less than 1.5. And so I've got that measured here, and I'll try to wrap it around square. Okay. Since we're going to be pulling that off at some point, I'm going to fold the end of it over so I can get it off easily. Okay, so 1 7/16 inches up from the base of the mast, and that locates the position for the 1/2-inch collar. And we want to braid the mast a little bit there so the epoxy has a little bit of something to hold on to more than the slippery surface of the mast. And it says use 100 grit. That would work, but I'm using 220 grit. That's going to work fine, because we not only epoxy the mast, epoxy the sleeve on, we also pin it on with stainless steel pin. So pretty much any grit that you can grab easily will be fine for this. Okay. 100 grit might be slightly better, but this will work fine. Okay. And that'll go on there. And then we have the gooseneck fitting, and then the mast joining sleeve. Okay, just like so. Now, the epoxy, I'm already mixed up. I think this will work okay. It's a little bit thick because it's been sitting there for a while, but it should work fine. I want to put the epoxy onto the mast, and we don't want to put it on the inside of the mast sleeve, because then we would be getting it all over the base of the mast. Okay, so that's still going to work. And as you push this sleeve on, twist it as you push it up towards the tape. That helps the epoxy get underneath the sleeve instead of just all pushing up with, above the sleeve. Okay, and we'll push that right up to the tape, and then we'll clean off. You can see there's quite a bit of extra epoxy there. We'll clean that off with maybe a little piece of veneer, scrape it off. There's a little piece of veneer that we can work with. So we'll just use that, sort of like a chisel to take off the excess. Remember, You probably found this out already for yourself, but it's a lot easier to clean off epoxy when it's wet than when it's after it's hard. Tough stuff. Okay, so there we have the sleeve there. And the instructions may say to let that set up, but I'm just going to go ahead and drill it now. And put the pin in. So we'll have that done. Okay, and that's a 1/16. It's a 1/16 inch pin, so it's a 1/16 inch bit, and it's a little bit easier if you have a little piece of masking tape on your collar, because then the drill bit doesn't want to slide sideways. You can do it without, but it's just easier with just a little bit of masking tape to drill through. Doesn't exactly matter what angle you're drilling, but if there's any curve to the mast, you want the curve to be sloping towards the back of the boat. And you know, in some ways it's nice to have the pin going through side to side on the mast. Okay, and here we go. Okay, and then we'll take our stainless steel rod and just get the burr off one end. You can use, there's a file. File's easiest, but you can use 220 grit sandpaper too. There's always, when you clip a rod, there's always going to be sort of a burr. You can't hardly even see it. You can probably feel it if you rub your fingers over it. So you want to have a slightly beveled end to slide in to your new hole, so it'll slide in easily. There we go. Okay, and it's easier to bevel that end while you have before you clip the rod off. Okay, and then you want to clip it off so it's a little more than 1/4 of an inch, because you want it to go all the way through from side to side on the that's going to go flying if I let it. And probably glasses there is a good plan. Closing your eyes is a secondary idea. Okay, and then tap that in with a hammer. Make sure it's staying lined up. Okay, there we go. And later on it's kind of nice. Well, there are a couple of things you can do here. Let's see if you can see it. The pin is just a hair longer than it really essentially has to be. You can see it sticking out. Let's get the tape off and you can see it better. You can see it sticking out on both sides a little bit. You can peen that, but don't be too aggressive or you'll crack the carbon fiber tubes. Well, let me show you how you can do that, or you can file it off. Either way, this isn't the best peening surface, but it should be fine. Just light tapping. That'll spread the ends out so the pin can never come out. But if you pound it too hard, you'll start to expand it inside the carbon fiber, and the carbon fiber won't like that. The carbon fiber will split. So just very light tapping. This is just, see how I'm holding it? I'm not hitting it like I'd hit a nail. I'm just holding it real close up like this, and it's just the weight of the hammer. I'm not putting any force into it at all. It's just the weight of the hammer. I'm letting it drop, you know, just less than an inch onto that pin to do the peening. So I'm not hitting it, I'm just letting it drop, and not even a full inch. Okay, so that's never going to come out. Now I can take this tape off and that's all glued and pinned. Okay, and now there's a little residue of epoxy at the top of that, but there's no epoxy at the bottom because we slid it up and epoxy slid out the top but didn't slide out the bottom, of course. Okay, and then our gooseneck fitting, and then the next step is the mast joining sleeve, 1 7/8 inch. See if there are any helpful tips here. Use the pipe cleaner and some remaining epoxy to slowly coat the inside of the mast joining sleeve. Okay, so this time we do it the opposite way because we don't want the goal is not to have epoxy up, gluing the gooseneck stainless steel loop in place, because we want that to pivot easily. So this time we coat the inside of the mast joining sleeve and slide it up, because if we coat the mast, we'll be pushing all that epoxy up just like we saw onto the gooseneck sleeve. So see if this epoxy is still kind of pushing the limits on this epoxy as far as its workability. I think we can still make it work though. Okay, it's pretty thick right now, and I'm not sure. I don't think the pipe cleaner is going to work on this. It's too thick for a pipe cleaner, maybe. A little bit more, so we'll push it down with something a little bit more solid. So typically you'd use a pipe cleaner to push, to coat the inside of the tube. Grab this extra piece of stainless steel to work that down into the tube a little bit as we slide the tube into place, so it'll also slide and it'll also work its way down. Okay, I think that's going to work okay. Let's see, we can coat the bottom inside of the tube at the bottom too at this point, because the next step is we're going to slide the mast extension sleeve, the 4-inch mast extension sleeve, into the bottom. So having the entire inside of the tube coated at this point is a good plan. And so getting lots of epoxy up in there. Okay, yeah, the thicker stuff's going to work fine. Oh, and now it's nice to braid the bottom of the mast. I'm just going to use the file, but I think the instructions probably tell you 100 grit. That's great. 100 grit would be fine. File works fine too. You just want a mechanical bond. You want to roughen up the surface because the carbon fiber has such a smooth surface. Epoxy is real good at grabbing onto things, but it'll hold on a lot better if you roughen it up a little bit. It'll be a little bit aggressive here, but not where the gooseneck is. Okay, and then slide on the mast joining sleeve like so. Remember, we don't want epoxy out the top of that. I've got a little bit of epoxy I'm going to wipe off there at the top, because we don't want epoxy on the up against the gooseneck. Okay, that's good. Okay, and again, spinning that as you push it up. Now you don't want to crimp the gooseneck. You do want it close though. You want it still to slide easily. That's a little tight. Okay, that's good. It's a little bit sticky there, but I don't think it's too bad. Okay, now, the epoxy will have a little bit of trouble holding onto the stainless steel, but you want to keep this. You don't want a whole lot of epoxy up against the stainless steel. Okay, so that's good. And now the mast extension. Now, if I hold the mast here and push this up, the sleeve will slide up tight against the gooseneck, and we don't want that. So I'm going to hold the mast joining sleeve and push the mast extension tube into the epoxy before it sets up. It's pretty, it's getting a little bit far along. Okay, now the mast joining sleeve slid a little bit, so the gooseneck's not as tight as I want it to be. So we'll slide that back up into position. We'll make sure the mast extension is tight, and that is tight. I can't push it in. I'm pushing hard, and I can't push that in. It's butted right up against the base of the mast, and that looks just right. So now let's go ahead and drill those pins through, and we want one pin in the going through into the mast and one pin going into the mast extension. And it'll be easier if I have this, I'm going to just lever it over. Let's see, we need a little bit more height here. Yeah, I just want that level. So a little bit more, something a little bit thicker. Maybe my epoxy pot will work. There we go. Okay. And I'm going to line those pins up, just for cosmetic reasons. I'm just going to line those pins up with the first pin that I drilled. And that'll just look like I was more intentional in what I was doing and not just random. Okay, and make sure everything's tight together again. Hold the mast and push the mast extension tube up. And again, a little piece of masking tape on there will make it a little bit easier to drill. Oops. Ay, ay, ay. And a big part of this, don't get your fingers sticky, because once you get your fingers sticky, everything you touch will get sticky. So keep your fingers, you can wear gloves, but keep your gloves clean if you're wearing gloves. But, you know, I just barely got the teensy little bit of stickiness on there. So have a paper towel right handy and wipe your fingers every few minutes if you think you might be sticky. Okay, so just a little bit of tape. Make it easier so the bit doesn't want to skid sideways. And put the tape right there. And here we go. I'm coming down just about 5/16 of an inch, just a little over 1/4 of an inch. Now I'm going to put that first pin in there because I want it to, I don't want the holes to get misaligned. So I want to get that first pin in, and then I'll do my second pin. But if I tried to do both holes at once, I'm afraid the first hole would get out of alignment, and then I'd have a hard time. Well, as the two holes are aligned differently, it's not ever going to work actually. You'd have to re-drill. Okay, again, beveling the tip of the stainless steel and then clipping off a pin that's a little over 1/4 of an inch. The mast is 1/4 of an inch, 0.240, and then you have the sleeve and holding it up. Okay, be careful with the clippers. We don't want blood. And oh, we're trying to drop my pin. Hold on to your pin, or else you have to make a new one. Here we go. Okay. A little fiddly here, and that's the beveled end going into the hole. Just tapping, tap, tap, tap. Not pounding, you're just tapping. Okay, good. And then we'll do the same for the second pin, now you've seen how that works, so I'll be back here in a minute with the second pin. Okay, now we got both pins in, and after the epoxy sets up, we'll go ahead and I'll file those pins just a little bit shorter with a real fine mill file. Probably this file here would be just right. And but I'll let the epoxy set up first. And leaving the pins a little bit long like that is fine too. That won't hurt anything really. But it'd be a little cleaner looking with the pins a little bit shorter. Okay, and this the goosenecks, it's a little sticky right now, but there's not a significant amount of epoxy. It's not going to bind on there or anything. So it's still free to spin easily, but it can't move up and down the mast in any significant amount of distance. Maybe just a 64th of an inch on each side of it. Okay, and so mast all in one piece, ready to go. Similar on the T39, it's just the mast is shipped to you in one piece instead of sleeving it there. So good job on that. Now I think we're ready to move on to the let's move on to the booms. The next section in the instructions is fitting the mast to your boat, but I just glued in the mast sleeve tube in the deck, and I want to let that epoxy set up before I start messing with it. So we'll skip steps 6 and 7 for now, and then come back to those a little bit later, and go on to the carbon fiber booms, the section called carbon fiber booms. Preparing the booms, gluing in the carbon fiber inserts. Okay, well, I know sort of where we're heading with this, so let's just start with gluing in the carbon fiber inserts. And here we have our small diameter carbon fiber rod, and I'm going to wrap it with tape because that makes it easier to cut. And at the end of the tape, I'm just going to peeling off tape that's stuck tight. It's kind of a nuisance, so I'm just going to fold the edge of the tape all the way along, and so I'll be able to grab that fold and pull it off easily. Okay, so the edge of the tape is folded, so it's at the back end of each boom, it's a 1-inch piece. So that's easy. Let's do the 1-inch pieces. So we'll cut the 1-inch pieces. That looks like 1 inch. Although I suppose I could check it with my ruler. Yeah, that's exactly 1 inch actually. Couldn't be closer than it is to 1 inch. It's absolutely perfect. Okay, and wrapping the tubing makes it less likely to split. You can see how I'm rolling the tubing, so I'm cutting through the outside layer of the tubing everywhere. And then at the end, there's just like one strand holding it. I'm just going to pull it hard and break that one strand. So there I have a pretty clean, well, it's the other end I cut. You know, a clean enough cut. Then I can pull the tape off easily. Okay, and then another 1-inch piece. Again, I can guess an inch pretty precisely. I won't even measure it this time. And rolling the tube as you cut, and then a sharp jerk at the very end. And yes, those two pieces are almost exactly the same length. So 1 3/8, that's just under 1 1/2, 1 3/8 right there. Doesn't, again, you know, an inch would probably be long enough, but we just give a little bit more support to the where the gooseneck slides into the boom. And again, rolling the tube, and you get to almost to the end, and do a sudden jerk and you break that last fiber. And then there's just one more piece, the longer piece for the front end of the jib boom, 2-inch piece for the front end of the jib boom. So I'll measure that again. There, 2 inches. I just marking with on the tape. The other reason for putting tape on is it's hard to see your marks on carbon fiber, and this is just a black Sharpie marker, permanent marker. Okay, and okay, so now we have all our pieces, and tells us to mix up. You can see the block of wood makes it a lot easier to saw against something. I don't think you can do it just holding it in the air, sort of. And sawing against a good table would not be so appropriate. This is just a scrap block that I don't care about. So that's helpful. Okay, I can check this epoxy, but I kind of think it's probably pretty far gone. Oh, we can still probably use it. Okay, we'll use this. Makes it easy. So the booms, here are the booms. The shorter one is the jib boom, the longer one is the main boom. And I'm going to put a little epoxy on the end of the boom. This is jib boom now. Jib boom has the longest piece of carbon fiber tube. And I'll coat the carbon fiber tube with the sticky stuff, which is almost set up too hard to use, but it's just going to work still. And if you want to be if you wanted to be super careful about all the stuff, you could braid the outside of the small tubes, but they're never going to come out. I mean, there's not much load on them. Oh, this is the one that sticks out the front. I stuck it in too far. Okay, sticks out the front 5/8 of an inch, a little over ½ an inch. And since I stuck it in too far, I've got all this epoxy mess I got to clean off. If you want to be super neat with epoxy, it doesn't hurt to have acetone at hand, because it dissolves the epoxy instantly and cleans it up very nicely. But you don't want a lot of acetone on your hands. That's not a good plan, because the acetone dries out your skin, and then you don't have the natural oils in your skin helping protect you against the epoxy, and it's a bad combination. So soap and water is the best way to clean your skin. Okay, well, that's good. Well, I might just hit that with acetone, make it look better. Just cosmetic. And if I hadn't pushed it in too far, I wouldn't really have as much epoxy on it. From your vantage point, you probably can't even see that it's got kind of a mess of epoxy on it, but that'll just wipe right off with acetone. There. Okay. Now it looks clean. A lot clean. Well, a lot cleaner at least. There. Okay. That's pretty nice. Nice and clean. Okay. And now at the other end of the jib boom, it just gets a 1-inch piece. And again, working quickly, we can use this old epoxy. This epoxy is left over from gluing in the mast step, and it's which I did a while ago, well, at least 45 minutes ago. But it's a fairly cool day here in the Northwest, raining outside. Although we've had beautiful summer weather until the last couple of days. So, but being cool enough, it's still, this epoxy is still usable. And this end gets glued in flush with the end of the tube. Try not to get too much epoxy down inside the tube, or else you're not going to be able to get your screw eye in. There. Okay, we could glue the screw eyes in. I wonder if we can do it at the same time without the tube just spinning. It doesn't really matter the order of progressing. You could, if you glue your screw eyes into the tubing before you put the tubing into the boom, you may split that small diameter tubing with the screw eye. I'm not going to be able to glue it in now. It'll just, no, if I try to do it now, it'll just push the tubing back up inside the boom too far. So I don't want to do it now. So, if possible, keep the tubing from getting too much epoxy inside of it. Which I've got a fair amount of epoxy covering the end of the tubing now, but the solution to that will be to run a drill bit in if the epoxy gets hard and you can't find the hole for the screw eye. That would just be a 1/16 inch drill bit. Okay, and yeah, don't try to put the screw eye in at this point. Although, on this one I'm going to do it the other way. I'm going to put epoxy onto the screw eye. The instructions tell you to put the screw eyes in later, but you don't have to follow the instructions always. I'm going to put this screw eye in now, and I don't think it'll split it. It may split it, but it might not. Doesn't really matter if it splits because the epoxy will hold it back together. Okay, that's going in good. Okay, that did not split it. It's a close fit. It's a close call whether it's going to split it or not. Okay, so now this is for the main boom, and I've got my screw eye in already, and this is the back end of the main boom. Gets the screw eye, and this epoxy is almost unworkable, but I still think I can make it do it. There's not a lot of load on these, on what I'm doing on these little things glued into the end of the boom, and they stick in. I mean, they're never going to come out, so I'm not too worried about the state of the epoxy. I coated the end of the boom and coated the sides of the piece I'm sliding in. And this is the longer boom. Okay, got the right one. Can't get it in. There we go. Okay. Okay, so that works fine, putting the screw eye in. And this is a screw eye with a brass sleeve liner in it. One of these screw eyes, you're going to need the white paper here. One of these screw eyes with the liner in it. Otherwise, the thin spectra line they'll be running through that would just pull out where the screw eye is clenched closed. It would not work. Okay, and then just one more. See if we can make this epoxy go for the last one in the front end of the main boom, and then we'll have total success. This is going to be close, so whether we can make this work. Okay, and flush and clean that off. So the only one that sticks out is the one in the jib boom. And now let's see. Where's my gooseneck? Okay, there. Okay, so we may have to run a drill bit in, 1/16 inch drill bit in the end of these, a couple of these, because the epoxy's kind of covering up the hole. But I got as little epoxy covering up the hole as possible. And so now we're in good shape. And I did like gluing that screw eye into the end of this little carbon fiber tube before putting the carbon fiber tube in, because the one that I didn't do that on, I can't subsequently, until the epoxy's set up, I can't put the screw eye in because it'll just push that tube into the boom farther and the screw eye won't have anything to hold on to. Okay, and then I want to make sure I take my epoxy brush out of my mixing pot and smooth things out so I can use my mixing pot again. And now on to the next step. The next, I think we're getting to where we'll be adding the heat shrink tubing to the booms next. I think it'd be easier if I let the epoxy set up a little bit. If you want to rush things along, you can heat these booms up because the carbon fiber is not going to bubble, and the epoxy will set off in like 15 minutes if you put it next to a 100 amp 100 watt light bulb, an incandescent light bulb. It doesn't help any to put next to an LED bulb. But don't melt, don't burn things, don't incinerate them with too much heat. But you can't do that with wood. You can't heat up wood because the wood, the air and the cells of the wood will be forced out as it expands and bubble in the epoxy. So don't try that trick with wood at all. The other trick to making epoxy for these small jobs set up faster is to heat your mixing pot, and that's one of the reasons I like the metal bottomed, the orange juice tins with the metal bottoms, cardboard with metal bottoms. The other reason is the epoxy sticks to the container so it doesn't pop off after it gets hard and gets into your next mixing job. However, you know, plastic containers can work fine. You just have to use new plastic containers every time you mix the epoxy. Whereas the orange juice containers, one orange juice container should last through building the whole boat. If you remember, take your brush out before it sets up, so you don't mess up your container. Okay, so we're going to let these set up, and then this diagram in the instructions, which actually was contributed by a builder, Chris Jerome, said, "Oh, a diagram would be helpful here." So, and it is very helpful. So we'll be using these diagrams to place the heat shrink tubing on the booms as the next step. We now have glued in the small diameter carbon fiber tube at both ends of both booms. This is the main boom here. And then there's a separate diagram for the jib boom. So that makes it easy. All the measurements are shown and everything on the diagrams. Here's the jib boom diagram a few pages later. And so as you work, you don't have to read the instructions anymore. You can just look at the diagrams. Although reading the instructions won't hurt anything. Or you can just watch the video for this step. Okay, see you soon. I'm going to get some lunch. It's a little bit late. But this is great. We're making fast progress. It's fun stuff. It's it's quite easy to do. And we've designed the kits so there's really no place you can mess up dramatically. Some people's work is more meticulously precise than other people's, but it all works. So any approach is fine. Okay, see you soon. Okay, we're back. Now the instructions have you start with the main boom, but we jumped ahead and put the screw eye in the back end of the main boom, and not a problem. But the brass tube won't fit on over the screw eye. So we're going to have to reverse the order that is shown in the instructions and put the back heat shrink tubing on first, and then the brass sliding tube, and then the front heat shrink tubing on at this end. So that works fine, but I guess that's why the instructions have you put the screw eye in the back end of the boom later on in the process, so you don't have that. So you don't have the issue of not being able to slide the brass tube on from the back end of the boom. Okay, not a problem though. We will progress with the heat shrink tubing and put on the back section of heat shrink tubing on first, and then the brass tube, and then the front section of heat shrink tubing. We're just ready to put the heat shrink tubing on. Let's cut the heat shrink tubing first, and that's just any pair of scissors will do that fine. Cuts quite easily. And cut the heat shrink tubing, 9-inch length of black heat shrink tubing into 4 pieces, 1.5 inch, and then 2 at 2 inches, and then the last piece 3.5. So 1.5 inches, 2 at 2 inches, and the second one at 2 inches, and then the last piece will be close to 3.5 inches. Well, a little short, but close enough. Okay, and whoops. Then we'll start with the main boom, and again, remember we've put the screw eye in earlier, so we're out of sequence a little bit, so we have to start with the back end of the main boom, and that's with a 2-inch, looking now at the diagram in the instruction manual right here. We're starting at the back end of the main boom where the screw eye is, and we're putting on the 2-inch piece here, and that measures 2 3/4 inches from the front, from the back end of the boom. 2 3/4 inches. Again, let's get our ruler set up here so we can use it. Shorter ruler might be good. 2 3/4 inches. So right there. And heat gun or heat source, whatever you're using. Start in the middle of the tubing, because if you seal up both ends first and have an air bubble in the middle, you've got a problem. You have to, at that point, you'd have to and then work out towards the ends. At that point, you have to use a needle or something to pop the air bubble and then get it heated again to get it to seal down. You don't want any air bubbles, so you can watch the heat shrink tubing shrink as you go and make sure it's shrinking from the middle to the ends. And when it's done, you'll see a little, very thin line of adhesive coming out at the edge of the heat shrink tubing. That's what you want. Just a little glistening, I don't know if you can see it in the camera, but just a little glisten of, yeah, you can see it, of the adhesive right at the edge of the heat shrink tubing. And here you just can see it when the light catches it right. Anyway, that glisten right at the edge of the heat shrink tubing. You definitely want to be able to see that, or else heat it a little bit more until you see that squeezing out. Okay, and then the key thing is don't forget the brass tube, because it will not fit over the heat shrink tubing. If you don't put that on now, you're going to be in trouble. Okay, then the other length of tubing is at the front end of the boom, and that's another 2-inch piece, and that's also 2 3/4 inches in from the end of the boom. Let's second piece starts at point 2 3/4 inches forwards from the back end of the boom, and yeah. So both measurements are 2 3/4 inches. So that makes it easy. So 2 3/4 inches. Okay, so that's at 2 3/4 inches. And the brass tube is between the two pieces of heat shrink tubing. And now we'll get that one going. Again, heat from the middle. You can watch it shrink tight, and when you've got the middle shrunk tight, then work out towards one end, and then work towards the other end. Watch for that line of resin. I'm rolling the tubing, the boom, as I go, so I get even heat around the entire length of the, surface of the heat shrink tubing. Okay, well now this is actually probably pretty good. I did get a bubble. See that air bubble in the middle? I thought I was doing pretty carefully, but I still got a bubble. So, but easily taken care of. So we just need a pin or a needle, it's better. And then we'll poke that bubble and reseal it down tight. You don't want to leave the bubble though. So we'll just lance that bubble there, and then we should be able to get it to heat up. I'm going to start on the opposite side from where we poked it. You might have to poke it again while you're heating it. It doesn't really matter if you have to poke it several times. We're not talking about we're not concerned about water getting in or anything. It's not going to be not going to be an issue. Just make sure you have it so it's tight everywhere and any bubbles have been poked and the air gotten out, so it'll shrink tight and seal onto the tube. I'm not sure. Yeah, so one more poke. Make sure we can get it tight. That should do it. Okay, so I had to poke that 4 or 5 times. Not a problem. The last time I poked it, I went through one side and came out the other side. So I had 2 holes, and that seems to have worked fine. Okay. So now I think we've got a tight fit there. I don't feel any air in there, and we're in good shape. Okay. So the needle is critical if you get an air bubble. Okay, now we've got both of our shrink tubings in place and our brass slider between them. Let's go ahead and while we're doing this work with the heat shrink tubing, let's go ahead and do the heat shrink tubing on the jib boom as well. And this time we didn't put a screw eye in, so we can approach it from either end, so we don't have to be too careful there. Also, there's no slider on the jib boom. We do have to keep track of which end is which because they get different lengths of heat shrink tubing. The front end of the boom is the end with the 5/8 of inch of carbon fiber tube of a smaller dimension sticking out. And let's see, we go 2 1/4 inches. No, 3. I'm sorry, I take that back. That's 2 1/4 to a lashing. On the boom where we lash on a rigging eye. We go 3 1/2 inches back to start the 1 1/2 inch piece of tubing. So 3 1/2 inches back, and that's from the front end of the boom itself, not the little carbon fiber piece. 3 1/2. So that's pretty far back actually. Okay, that's there. Oh, we'll see if we can do it without the bubble. That is easier. Good. Looks good. And then the longer piece, last piece of tubing, goes at a point, this is the 3 1/2 inch piece of tubing, goes at a point 2 1/2 inches back from the back end of the boom, which will have a screw eye in the back later. If we'd put that screw eye in, the heat shrink tubing actually slides over the screw eye, so that would not have been an issue if we had that screw eye in. It's just the brass tube won't slide over the screw eyes. Okay, and on this, let's see if we can do this. I think if you get too much heat, sometimes it makes it bubble. So don't keep heating the middle longer than you need to. Okay, that looks good. Yeah, nice and tight. And a little adhesive squeezing out at both ends. So I think the tubing I did get the bubble on. I think I heated it too much initially, and that's why the bubble formed. So as soon as it shrinks, you see it shrinking up. As soon as it shrinks, move out towards, keep working out towards the ends. Okay, but we're in good shape. Everything's good. Then, what's next? Really, with the diagrams being so clear, we can just go by the diagrams. So we have a vinyl grommet on this piece of tubing, and a vinyl grommet on the brass tubing, and 2 vinyl grommets here. So let's start with the vinyl grommet on the brass tubing, and that has to work all the way over the heat shrink tubing at the back end of the boom. That's a little hard to get it started on the brass tubing, but a little bit of force will do it. There we go. Okay, so vinyl grommet on the brass tubing, and that can be close to the middle of the tubing. Vinyl grommet on the back heat shrink tubing, and again we'll put it close to the middle of the tubing. Okay, and vinyl grommet, 2 vinyl grommets on the front heat shrink tubing. And these vinyl grommets are how we adjust. We slide them to adjust different settings for the sails. Okay. And then on the jib, turning the page to page 60 in my manual, we have 1 vinyl grommet on the front 1.5 inches of tubing. Okay, and then we have 2 vinyl grommets on the back piece of tubing. 1 further forwards and 1 farther back. Okay, there we go. And then let's go back to our main boom. Now we've got all the heat shrink. 2 grommets on the wider piece of tubing on the jib boom, and 1 on the forward piece of tubing. Now let's go back to the main boom, and we can attach one of the clips, little brass and stainless steel clips, to the piece of tubing, to the vinyl grommet on the brass tubing. That'll just hang from there, and we'll use the 80-pound Spectre for that. I mean 90-pound Spectre. Oh, it tells us to put the screw eye in the back end of the jib boom now. Well, we'll get to that in another minute or two. And actually, it goes through. Let's stick with the instructions. The instructions go through lashing the brass eyelets, or we also call them rigging eyes, to the booms. So let's do that part. These are some of these will be the bigger rigging eyes, like so, and some will be the smaller rigging eyes, like these ones. Okay, the smaller rigging eye will be lashed at a point 2¼ inches back from the front end of the jib boom. And that's the smaller eye. So we'll start there. Don't get these over the carpet, you won't ever find them. And 14 inches it suggests for lashing. That gives you more than you need, but it's easier if you have a little extra. The Spectre is really hard to cut with scissors. You can use a knife to cut it, or a really sharp pair of scissors, but it's hard to cut. Okay, so I'll tie an overhand knot, just a simple overhand knot, and then I'll pull it up, sort of keep it in the middle of the line, and pull it up fairly small, and then I'll try to capture the eyelet. Can't see that, can you? go down just a little, we'll zoom out just a little bit. Actually, I'll zoom in for this and then zoom back out later. Okay, here's my eyelet here. Well, that is hard to see on the screen. And so I'm going to capture that in the loop. If I miss it, I'm not going to pull the loop up all the way tight, because once it's tight, it's hard to get it open. Okay, so it's right around the edge, right around the periphery of the groove in the periphery of the eyelet, and the outer groove. And then I'll double up and tie a second knot, if I can tell which way to make a real square knot. I'll do that. I think it's this way. Okay, so that's tied on tight, and then we'll lash that 2 1/4 inches back, I think, from the front end of the jib boom. So it doesn't really matter where you start, it's just where it finishes. So wrap one end around the jib boom in one direction, about 4 or 5 wraps probably, and the other end around the jib boom the other direction. And then those two will tie together. It's best if you don't have the wraps overlapping each other. Sorry. Whoops, I think I lost one there. It's best if they're just, each wrap is separate and right against the boom, lined up side by side instead of overlapping. It'll just look neater. Probably work better too. Okay. And when you have 5 wraps on each side, then tie a square knot. And the beauty of the Spectra is we'll be able to pull this up tight after we tie a square knot in it. Because the stuff is so slippery that even a proper square knot will slide in it. So, tying this up, let's see, and this way. Okay, so now you can see we have it tied, and we still have significant tails to hold on to. So we can grab those with pliers and slide it up tight. Now sometimes the pliers will cut through the string. So if you're holding it up real close and you cut through, it's a little awkward. So grab the ends of your tails. And if you cut through, you still have a lot of tail to grab hold of. And pull, pull, pull until that lashing is super tight. We'll still be able to slide it though. So that looks like it's a little too far on. We're at 2 3/4, so we'll slide it down to 2 1/4, I think is what it said. 2 1/4, yeah, right there. So there we go. We've got a nice tight lashing there. We pulled it all tight, and it just skids right through the square knot. It'll loosen itself too, though. So now we have to tie a couple more square knots on top, or tie a couple more hitches on top, one more square knot, full square knot, and then that'll hold. And then later on we can put, if you have CA, you can put a dot of CA on this, but we don't want to do that quite yet. We want to adjust it to our particular boat first before we lock it in place with CA. Or if you don't have CA, you can put a dot of epoxy on it, and that'll work just as well. It just takes longer to set up. CA is just super glue, of course. Okay, so there. Now we've put another square knot on top. We've pulled it super tight with the pliers, and we have a very clean, neat lashing there with the smaller eye. See if that focuses. Okay, and then we'll just cut off the ends of the trailing ends, and that's good. And then we have one more lashing to do. Let's go back to our diagram. And we're going to lash a large screw eye at this end, just behind, at this end, which is the back end, just behind the heat shrink tubing. So just a little bit farther back than the heat shrink tubing at 2 inches. So another 14-inch piece of Spectra here. So I'll go ahead and do the second lashing on the jib boom with the large rigging eye, and that's going to be done. And then I'll do the lashing on the main boom, and that's again with a larger rigging eye, and it's lashed to the brass tube in front of the sliding grommet. So towards the front of the boom from the sliding grommet, but right on the brass tube. So I'll do those lashings and then be back with you. Okay, here we are. And we have, I want to show you trimming the lines off with a sharp knife. Can work quite well. You get a very clean cut if the knife is sharp enough. And on scissors you always get sort of a mushy cut. Okay, so there we have it, and now we have a brass sheet clip brass and stainless sheet clip to lash onto the grommet here, the sliding grommet. Get rid of these bits and pieces, and we have 12 inches of line, heavy Spectra line for that lashing, a little less than on the other lashings. And we want to do it around the grommet. We don't want to tie it, so we don't want the clip to be up in the grommet, in the groove of the grommet, because then it can't pull sideways. We want it to actually align sideways on there. So we're going to do 3 layers, 3 wraps around the grommet first with our line and tie that, and then we'll tie the clip on separately. It's just 2 and 3. Okay, and then tie a square knot there. Okay, so we're tying a square knot around the lashing. Best if it's a square knot, not a granny knot. Okay, you don't have to tie multiple knots there really, although it doesn't hurt. Actually, I think I will tie another square knot on top, even though it's not going to pull out. It'll mean that the clip I tie on is just a little bit farther from the, so it can't pull up into the groove because it'll be a little farther from the inside of the groove. Okay, there. And then we'll tie on the clip. I would like to run through the eye of the clip, the smaller eye, and then around and through that eye a second time. So we've looped through it twice on one side, and then slide the clip up, right up to the vinyl grommet, just pressing against it, just not up in the groove. And then tie your first square knot here, and here we definitely need 2 square knots. Just don't tie them so tight that the clip pulls up into the groove. Then a second square knot. Okay, so there's 1 square knot, and clips right up against the vinyl grommet, but it's not pulling up into the groove, which would mean it stands up straight. And then we'll do another square knot on top, because this knot could pull out. Could slip out if it's not tight enough, or if it's not enough. Okay. And then that second square knot I'm going to pull tight with pliers. Make sure it's really locked in there and won't ever loosen up. Okay. And grab it. Okay. And trim those lines off. Okay. And now our main boom is ready for this is the front end of the main boom, and the gooseneck will go in there from the mast. So this will slide on. I think we've got it blocked with epoxy though, so we'll have to slide a drill bit in there. Yeah, it's gonna be hard to get it in. Oh, maybe we'll go. Yeah, it went in. The epoxy is still a little soft. There. Okay. So that's how that's going to rig, and that moves easily on the around the mast at the gooseneck. So that's good. And the boom bang will come up to the boom. But I think next thing is to fit the mast. Well, maybe the next thing is actually to well, let's fit the mast to the boat, and then we'll still want to glue the gooseneck rod into the boom, and we'll want to glue a screw eye into the back end of the jib boom. Screw eye with sleeve liner into the back end of the jib boom. So we'll fit the mast first, and then we'll do both those glue jobs at the same time. That'll be easier. And neither one takes hardly any epoxy, so that's simple. Okay, so now we're going to fit the mast to the boat. If this is the T39, you've done this a little bit differently. That mast stays its full length, and so when you put on the mast joining sleeve, the 1 7/8 inch sleeve and the 1/2 inch sleeve, you've already fit it to your boat following the instructions. So, but now on the T37, we have the mast is about 1/2 inch longer than its final length, so now we'll fit it to the boat. Okay, here's our boat, here's our mast. The mast sleeve is now fully set up. And here we have the mast sleeve comes up quite a bit above the deck, and we'll have to take that down a little bit because otherwise the base of the mast isn't long enough. So we need to that's a 2 7/8, and we have at the base of our mast we have almost 2 7/8. So if we take this down, well, ideally we take it down almost to the deck level. So we'll go ahead and do that. There are a few ways to do that. Dremel is a good way, but I don't want to make the dust down here. Sanding it is another good way. You just don't want to, if your deck is already varnished, you don't want to sand it with, you don't want to mar your deck by sanding it. And this deck is already nicely varnished, so I'll take it up to the shop and sand this down till it's almost flush with the deck, just sticking up a little bit. If we just have, well, we have to have room for the boom bang, which is a 1/16, and we're a little more than a 1/16 away from bottoming out. The trick is here, you can't have the downward pressure of the mast sitting on the boom bang, because the boom bang won't spin, won't rotate around the mast if the weight of the mast and the downward pressure of the mast is sitting on the boom bang. So the bottom of the mast has to be bottomed out in the hull at the bottom of the mast step, and the load needs to be taken down to the bottom of the hull, and then the boom bang will swing easily around the mast. So I'm going to take the mast step down and then be right back. Now we actually used a Dremel cutting wheel. That worked great, but we could have sanded it down as well. So now we took the mast step tube down a little bit, and now we have space for the the mast sitting in the base, in the bottom of the boat, against the epoxy that we use for the mast step, and we have space for the boom bang. We actually have a little bit more space than we want. We probably have an extra about 1/16 of an inch there, so the boom bang is free to move up and down, so a little bit more than we want. So I'm going to sand the base of the mast just that 1/16 of an inch, and so the boom bang will not be squeezed between the collar sleeve on the mast and the top of the mast tube sleeve in the deck, but it will be not able to move up and down quite as much as it is now. So just about 1/16 of an inch. Probably be okay the way it is, but I'd rather have it. So we're just going to tape that, and I'll just sand that off to that 1/16 of an inch there. You see how little that is. And then the boom bang will have just, you might, I'm pretty precise with things like this, but you might want to sand it a little bit, fit it, sand it a little bit, fit it, sand it a little bit, fit it, so you don't take off too much. If you take off too much here, you'd have to lower the mast step again. So just sand a little bit, then fit it with the boom bang slid in place, and then make sure you don't sand off so much that the boom bang gets captured, compressed between the sleeve and the deck and the mast joining sleeve, because that boom bang needs to rotate easily. We've got a good fit. Slide the boom bang fitting on, and then slide the mast in, and the boom bang fitting really just barely has any movement up and down, and yet when I push down hard on the mast, the boom bang fitting is not supporting the mast. It's still totally free to slide. So the bottom of the mast down inside the boat is touching the bottom of the hull. The top surface of the hull on the inside, or the bottom of the mast step tube. So we're good there. Now the next thing the instructions leads us to do is drill the holes in the mast, and the key thing here is that we put the nylon tube in place here before we drill those holes. We want the nylon, because we didn't used to use the nylon tube, and the screw eyes will hold fairly well in the carbon fiber tube. They'll hold for a couple of years, and then with the pull of the forestay, the screw eyes will loosen up in the carbon fiber and tend to pull out, and then they have to be glued in with epoxy. But with this nylon tube in place, we drill a hole right through the carbon fiber mast and then on through the nylon tube, and when the screw eyes are screwed into that nylon tube, they never will pull out. You cannot get them to pull out even after years of sailing, because the nylon tube just grabs hold of the screw eyes threads. So now if you want these holes to, if you want your pins at the bottom of the mast to be going through from side to side, then you want to turn those pins so the pins are horizontal for when we drill these holes, because these holes go through from the front to the back of the mast. And again, let's see, I need to support the back end of the mast so it sits on the block nicely here. That should work. And the top hole is 3/8 of an inch down. Before we drill the holes, though, we want to tape. If we drill holes through the carbon fiber tube and through the nylon tube, inside the carbon fiber tube, and then the nylon tube moves, we won't be able to hit that hole with a screw eye. So so we'd be up the creek without a paddle, as they say. So we're going to tape this firmly, squeezing the tape around the nylon tube, so it's going to grab that nylon tube and hold it in place and tight to the mast. In fact, again, I'm going to fold the edge of the tape over so I can get that off easily. And now the nylon tube, we won't remove this tape until both screw eyes are screwed in to the mast, and we know that tubing is firmly held in place. Okay, and we'll drill right through the mast. Oh, the big thing is we have to switch drill bits at this point. If you drill a 16th inch hole, the screw eyes will be really loose in that 16th inch hole. You'd have to, the only way to correct that would be to glue them in with epoxy at that point. So we switched to our number 53 drill bit, which is perfect for the carbon fiber. If you use a smaller drill bit, when you screw the screw eye in, you probably split the carbon fiber. If you use a bigger drill bit, the screw eyes won't hold on very well. Okay, and so the first hole, a little hard to measure with the tape in place, of course, is 3/8 of an inch down from the top of the mast. And it's probably smart to mark that with a marker. 3/8 of an inch, so right, just over a quarter of an inch down from the top. Okay, and I'm going to drill this so my pins at the other end of the mast are horizontal, so in the boat they'll be sideways from one side to the other. And we'll try to get this pretty well centered here. Looking from above, and that looks pretty good. Right through from one side all the way through to the other side. Okay, and then the next hole is 5 inches down from the top of the mast. Don't measure from the first hole, it's 5 inches from the very top of the mast. And put a piece of tape and mark that. So, again, drilling through the tape makes it a lot easier to keep your bit from skidding on the slippery carbon fiber. And again, I'm going to fold the end of this because it's such a nuisance to try to grab the tape when it's on there tight. Okay, so 5 inches down, right here. And again, we're using the number 53 drill bit that comes with the kit. And right through from side to side and out the other side. Okay, and those two holes are lined up with each other, and they're pretty much perpendicular to the holes, to the pins. It doesn't really matter though. It does matter that these two holes be lined up with each other. That's important. Okay, and now we have that done. We're getting close to putting sails on. But I think the instructions are going to lead us to doing a little bit more with the booms here. Let's see where the instructions take us now. Further steps on the booms. Okay, it's getting the vinyl grommets on, and the brass clips, brass and stainless clips, then completing the boom bang. That's where we're at. So let's go ahead and work on completing the boom bang. Now, just make sure you find the main boom, not the jib boom. And at this point, we may as well glue that in there. The boom bang is going to go to the back sliding grommet, I believe. Make sure we got that right. Of the two grommets. Yes, the farther back sliding grommet, so it goes back to this one. And here's the boom bang piece. And yes, it's plenty long, that's good. And make sure the boom is slid all the way forwards. And now we'll want the boom to be at a 90-degree angle to the mast when we do our boom bang. And so the instructions just told us to bend this upright up to an angle. We've already done that, so we're ahead of the game here. Now, starting right here, this rod needs to bend in a loop. Whoops, you can't see that, can you? I'll help to be able to see it. Let's zoom in fact here. Okay, so starting right here, the boom bang rod, the stainless steel rod, needs to bend and loop up around the grommet. Now that grommet is, I think that grommet's placed pretty well. It's about just over 1/4 of an inch forwards from the back edge of the heat shrink tubing. That gives us some adjustment room both directions. Moving it a small amount changes the attitude of the boom dramatically, so it doesn't need to be adjusted very far either way. I'm going to make a mark with my Sharpie marker right there. Right here. And we will make that fit around here. I think that's looking good. Okay. And that loop, this loop's a little trickier. First we want to come up perpendicular to this loop, the first loop, like so. And then we want to make a loop around the boom. So yeah, that looks good. I think too, well, I can use regular pliers. So we're going to grab it here and start to make a loop that'll go around the boom. Around the grommet on the boom. We can't close this loop because we still have to get it on the grommet. Remember, the eye is going to be bigger diameter than the eye around the mast, because we're going around the grommet. You can get it so it's a pretty tight fit on there, and then pop it on. Oopsie. So slide it right into the groove in the grommet, like so, and this is about right. And then wrap it around, far enough around on the grommet that it can't release itself from the grommet, that it can't get off the grommet. So just a little bit farther, and then I think it will be captured. Okay, that's pretty well captured on the grommet. We can adjust the angles a little bit. Don't want to distort the grommet any more than necessary. And now, can we get back together? Here we go. So, so I slid. So now it's on the boom, and it's on the grommet, and it looks pretty good. Now I'll slide the boom bang onto the mast. I think by bending it backwards we can get it into the gooseneck. A little bit distorting things here, but there. So that's pretty good. We have the boom sloping downwards a little bit too much, so let's slide that grommet forwards a bit, and now we're looking pretty much where we want to be. This forward grommet needs room to adjust, but it's just the Cunningham, and the Cunningham doesn't use a lot of adjustments, so we probably are still okay there. And so let's get this finalized here. Bend things a little bit more so things are lining up a bit better. And then we'll clip off the excess a little bit there. Okay. Yeah, that looks good. Okay. Yeah, it's just about right. There we go. Okay. So a little bit of finesse on that, getting that just right, but not incredibly difficult. Okay. And then clip off the end. Some form of clippers. I don't know if these will get in there. Might have to use smaller clippers. Yeah, maybe. Well, no. Almost. Really close. Nope, I'll get the other clippers. Maybe these will work. Yeah. You're more likely to have needle nose pliers with clippers. Takes a bit of force, though. There. Okay. Now we've got our boom bang there. We just clipped off that end with the needle nose pliers, and that worked quite nicely. We could get in there pretty close. And we're at about a 90-degree angle. The gooseneck is, and everything's free to spin. So we're looking good here. Okay. And now, let's go back to the instructions. Rigging the mainsail. And so we need to get the mainsail, and we'll get the mainsail on the mast, and then we can do the final adjustment lines, put the forestay tube and the jib in place, and we'll be good here. Okay, jumping ahead, a couple of easy steps. We slid the mainsail onto the mast from the top, and then we located the hole 5 inches down from the top of the mast. We can locate that by sliding our thumbnail along the mast, and then you can feel the indentation with your thumbnail, and then screwed the screw eye into the 5-inch hole, and then on the front side of the mast, and then on the back side of the mast, we screwed a screw eye into the hole. It was just 3/8 of an inch down from the top of the mast. And then after screwing in both screw eyes, we took off the tape that held the nylon tube in place in the mast, so the nylon tube wouldn't spin or slide up and down. And now we have those screw eyes done. And now we can get back down to the bottom of the boom. And one of the first things maybe well, let's do the clue outhaul out here. I was going to say the Cunningham up at the front end of the boom, but we'll work on the clue outhaul instead. I think that's following the instructions. Yeah, doing the clue outhaul. Now, on the clue outhaul, well, let's see how much it says to take, if it tells us how much spectra. 5 inches long. There are two lines for the clue outhaul. One is holding the clue is the back lower corner of the sail, and one line holds the back bottom corner down to the boom, and that's not adjustable. It just says 5 inches, or 5 inches. So we'll just take a piece that looks about that long, and this is just a simple loop around the boom through the clue kringle, and you want you don't want the bottom edge of the sail crimped and, distorted by this loop being too short, but you want the bottom edge of the sail to be just about touching the boom. So parallel to the boom and just about touching it. And we'll tie a square knot here and pull it snug, but we don't want to slide it because we don't want to get the sail any tighter to the boom, and just barely touching it. Yeah, that looks just right. Then we'll tie another knot on another square knot on top of the first one, otherwise that knot will slide. Okay, and one additional knot here. And that loop is free to slide along the boom. And that's important because as you adjust, then we'll have a second line that pulls the back end of the sail out tight to the screw eye in the back end of the boom. So that's the line that's adjustable. This line doesn't need to be adjustable because we can pull down on the sail by sliding the boom bang. If we slide the boom bang back on the boom, it pulls the boom down tight, and if we slide it forwards, it lifts the boom a little bit. Okay, so we have that loop, and then the next line is quite a bit longer, 15-inch piece, so that's 12 plus 3, so 15 inches, and again the knife does a better job of cutting, and we can start this. I'll follow the instructions so we don't, there are a number of ways of doing it. Okay, and tie it to the screw eye in the back of the boom. I'm going to twist my boom a little bit. It's gripped by the boom bang pretty tight, but I want to twist it so that screw eye is facing upwards. Okay, so the screw eye is from the side, you're looking through the screw eye, and this loop of the screw eye is parallel to the mast. Okay, so we'll first tie our 15-inch piece of 90-pound Spectra to the screw eye with a square knot, just using the end of the line, pretty much as close to the end as is convenient. Because we'll probably need most of this 15 inches for this job. Okay, and again you're using 2 square knots here because one will just slide out under load. You could use half inches here just as well, and in fact probably half inch would be even more appropriate, but by the time you tie 2 knots on top of each other, it'll be good. Okay, and I'm going to use the pliers on the short end to pull that nice and tight. Okay, and then we go up through the cringle in the clew of the sail, and we're doing a 4-to-1 here. Whoops. So we're going to go through the cringle, then back through the screw eye, and then back through the cringle, and then forwards to the sliding grommet. Hope this is long enough. Looks like we're doing good. Okay, so through the cringle again, and then back through the screw eye, and then forwards to the sliding vinyl grommet. And have the sliding grommet set pretty much in the middle of the heat shrink tubing so we can adjust it either direction. And we'll go around the periphery of the sliding grommet, and then underneath the line, we'll catch the line. So we're going around the grommet and then catching the line, and then going back the opposite direction around the grommet. So let's see if you can see this. So let's see where you are. Okay, so let's see if we can get a close-up on this. So I'm undoing what I've done so you can see it better. So here we are. We've gone around the periphery of the grommet, around the outside of the grommet, and then we've gone underneath the line going back to the clew and caught it. We stay in the periphery of the grommet, and then we're doubling back and going the opposite direction around the grommet, and then we're going to tie it. Oh, we do have just barely enough here. Interesting. That might be wanting to be extended in the instructions. Let's Slide that back just a little bit so we can get that tied. And then tied with 2 half hitches around the line that goes back to the clew. A little fiddly here. Tweezers can make some of these knots easier to tie. Okay, this is a short end. So I'd say 16 inches would be better here instead of the 15 inches. And we'll get the instructions updated to 16 inches. This is a little too fiddly for me. It's long enough, but it's just barely long enough. So make that piece 16 inches. Okay. There's 2 half hitches. Let's get one more in there. If we can, if we have enough. You have to slide that back again so we can get it. Loop, one more loop. Because we don't want it to slide out. I don't think it'll slide out, but it might be good to have one more loop. One more hitch. Okay, so that's 3 half hitches there. And that should do it. Okay. And then we'll slide that grommet forwards. Let's pull that loop a little bit, that last half hitch a little tighter with the pliers. That's tight, okay. And slide the grommet forwards a little bit. Now you don't want the bottom edge of your sail stretched taut because that just, you don't want a flat sail. Sails are supposed to be wing shaped, have shape to them. So that's 1 finger width in there. That might be good for a strong wind. In a lighter breeze, you want a fuller sail that'll have more power and use, you know, the wind most effectively. You won't be able to point quite as high because the sail will start luffing earlier, but you'll move a little faster. So in light air, we'd slide that back a little bit and have maybe 2 fingers width, maybe 1 inch between the bottom of the sail and the boom. So depending, this adjustment is fairly important. Gives you quite a bit of control over the sail shape. Okay, now we've got about 2 fingers width in there for, that'd be a light air setting. So so we've got the range that we want. That would be, you know, those 2 fingers. That's as loose as you ever want it. And we are pretty close to the back edge of our heat shrink tubing. But typically we'd be having that sheeted in. So it's a little bit more than 1 finger width, but not much, not full 2 fingers widths there. Okay. And that 4-to-1 at the back is important because it gives you more precise adjustment. Also, it will not load the grommet so heavily, so it won't ever slide. Okay, now I think the next line we'll do is the line on the boom bang, and that is just a control on the boom bang, which keeps the boom bang from, in real strong winds, we find that the boom bang, this is really strong winds, the boom bang could slide forwards and the boom lift up and be held up at an awkward angle, which means the sail really isn't working at all. And so you'd have to bring it in, your boat in, and readjust the boom bang. So we'll put a retainer line on the boom lit bang so that can't happen, and that'll run, we'll do a 4-to-1, and we'll use a bowsy in this for this. And we call it the bang adjuster, and that piece of line is 42 inches long because it's got a 4-to-1 and needs that much length. 42 inches long. That's a lot of Spectra. The Spectra is expensive stuff, and especially this form of it. It's very, very compact, tightly braided Spectra. Okay, so 42 inches for the bang adjuster. And the instructions, just so we're doing this the same way as the instructions tell us, starts ties around the boom bang here with half hitches. If you can see, that's right up at the top of the boom bang. I'll tie it and then I'll show you more precisely. Right up where the boom bang joins the vinyl grommet. I'm just tying the end of the line. And then again, I'm going to use the pliers to tighten that up. Okay, and that runs back. And we're going to slide a bowsy on there. The bowsies are these little plastic pieces. If I pick it up, little plastic pieces with 3 holes in them. You can see that. I'll hold it differently. So that's the bowsy. And we'll slide the spectra line starting at the wide end. We'll slide it up through the first hole, then down through the second hole, and then slide the bowsy along the line down through the second hole. There we go. Got it. And then we'll slide the bowsy on along the line till it's about, I'd say about 5 or 6 inches, maybe 5 inches away from the boom bang. Okay, and then the line is going to get an eyelet, I think 10.5 inches back from where it ties to the boom bang. So 10.5 inches back. I'm going to make it 10 inches on this boat so it's not right on top of the other grommet, sliding grommet. So 10 or 10.5 inches either way. And just go around the periphery of one of the little grommets, little baby grommet eyelets, rigging eyes, and tie that in with a couple of knots. There's one overhand knot and the second one. I'd be a little surprised if this ever wanted to slide. Pull those knots tight. I'm going to put one more knot on though, so 3 knots, because I don't want it to slide. Okay. And then the line goes back to the through the back screw eye on the back end of the boom, and then forwards and through that small eyelet again, through the middle of the eyelet. Not again, it's the first time through the middle. Okay, and then back to the screw eye in the back end of the boom and through that again. Try to keep these, go through the way that makes it so the lines aren't twisting over each other. And then we can come forwards and through the small eyelet again, and then we'll go forwards and tie to the bowsy. It doesn't really need to go through that eyelet again. I think I'm going to like it better just running straight to the bowsy. So not through the eyelet again. So so we've got basically a 4-to-1 ending in the bowsy. Might be a 3-to-1. I'd have to think a bit more about the math there. Anyway, so multiples at the back. The eyelet's tied. The small eyelet is, whoops. Small eyelet is tied. The bowsy is here. Small eyelet's tied in here. Then we go through the screw eye in the back end of the boom, through the eyelet, back through the screw eye in the boom, and then forwards to the third hole at the small end of the bowsy, and tie off with a series of half hitches there to the bowsy. Okay. And the bowsy should be located so it has plenty of room to slide forwards or back for adjustment. And it's kind of nice to have it sort of in the away from things, so it's not hard, so it's easy to grab. Okay, that's 3 knots. Yeah. That's 3 actually. And one more. And this is, grab it. This is number 4. Okay, and again I'm going to use my pliers to pull that tight and then nip the line off with a knife. Okay. And that just keeps that keeps the boom bang from sliding by itself in really strong winds. So an important line.
Call from 69822948887. Call from 6982229.
Okay, now we're going to do the Cunningham, and that's the final adjustment on the mainsail. The Cunningham is for, the Cunningham is for pulling down on the luff of the sail to, sometimes you want the sail to be kind of loose, the luff to be loose and full. Sometimes in strong winds you want to stretch that luff pretty tight. And so you have a flatter sail, and you've got tons of power. You can point really high with a flat sail and get up to that upwind mark a lot faster. In light air, though, you just need more fullness in the sail and more power, and you don't want such a flat sail, and consequently you can't point quite as high, but you sail faster. So in light air, loose, and tight, heavy air, keep everything tight and flat. So now we're doing the Cunningham. We have a piece of line that's 90-pound Spectra that's 15 inches long, and we're going to tie an eyelet into one end of that piece of line, as close to the end as possible, as convenient. And this is one of the small eyelets. Whoopsie, see if we can catch that little guy. Got it. Around the periphery of the eyelet. Okay, around the outside edge of the eyelet. That's gonna be hard to see, but just like that. Hard for the camera's focus. Know what to focus on there. Okay, and a couple more knots, of course, as always. Let's do a third one just for. So we'll do 3 knots here, 3 half hitches. And then use pliers to pull that tight. Okay, and we can cut that off, leave a 1/4 inch or so. Okay, and now this eyelet's going to be tied up tight to the gooseneck. As close to the gooseneck, around the stainless steel part of the wire of the gooseneck, tied up as tight as possible there. Now you may remember we're going to glue the gooseneck in. I think we'll go ahead and do that now. A little hard to get it far enough out now. We'll slide the. I don't know if I'm not sure it needs to be slid in, glued in, but we still need to glue the screw eye into the back end of the jib boom too. So we have to release our vang adjuster. Give it a lot of scope there. and slide the vang forwards as much as possible, and release our adjuster more. Vang adjuster. Slide the vang forwards. Okay, that should be enough. We'll just put epoxy on there, and well, we can go farther. Slide the vang adjuster back farther, vang forwards farther, and now we can get the vang off the bottom of the mast, I think, can't we? I'm not sure. See. We'll find out. That's as far back as the adjuster will go. Oh no, it won't go off the bottom. That's interesting. Okay, well, we don't need it off the bottom. We'll just slide the boom back as far as possible. Oh, now we have to ease the clue out all. Okay, I think we can get enough epoxy in there. And what we're really, I don't think the epoxy in the gooseneck's very important. What we're really doing epoxy for is the screw eye in the back end of the jib boom, and we'll do that now so that can set up. And we'll just put a little epoxy on the gooseneck as well. Okay, and so let's get that epoxy mixed together, and I'll show you how we do just drops of epoxy. You may have already done this and read it in the instructions, but works quite easily. And I'm going to use the bottom of my mixing container. That's another nice aspect of these mixing containers, orange juice cans. And we just want a very small amount. We use 5 drops of resin. So instead of sucking it into the syringe, I'm just going to dip the syringe and let 1 drop at a time fall off the syringe. 3, 4, 5. Okay, so that's 5 drops, and then 5 drops of hardener. Remember, don't just sit these lids. If you just sit the lid on there, somebody's going to pick it up by the lid. The lid will hold on for long enough to get it over the carpet, and then the lid will let go, and you'll have a big mess. So always screw the lids back on. It just takes a second. Okay, and just 1 drop of hardener. 5 to 1. Okay, right in the middle of the resin. Good aim. And then we'll just stir that up. Here we have a little piece of scrap veneer here. We'll stir it with that and coat our screw eyes. And in fact, okay. In fact, I'm going to put this over a light bulb, and I'll be back. But what we're doing is we're just going to put a little epoxy on the gooseneck, stainless steel, and at the end of the boom, and then slide them together. And not too much because we don't want to get it on the sail and stuff. And then we'll put a little epoxy on this one of the screw eyes with the brass sleeve liner, and then we'll screw that into the back end of the boom. But I'm going to heat this up because I want it to set off here real fast. I'll just hold it on top of a 100 watt incandescent light bulb, and if you get it too hot, it goes super liquid, and then a little smoke comes off the top of it, and bang, it's hard. So it's no good then. So don't get it quite that hot. Okay, I've done it many times though. Now we can finish up the Cunningham. We have the small grommet tied into the end of this 15-inch piece of Spectra, and around the periphery of the grommet, of the eyelet, rigging eye, and then we tied the Spectra so the eyelet was right up tight against the stainless steel part of the boom gooseneck, sorry, not the boom vang, gooseneck up at the mast, and then we'll just stick the Spectra up through the eyelet in the bottom of the mainsail, at the front corner, the tack of the mainsail. That's called the tack, T-A-C-K, and then back down through the rigging eye, and then it goes back to slide the sliding grommet, the front of the two sliding grommets here, the back one's the boom vang. The front one, slide it so it's about 3/8 of an inch back from the front of the heat shrink tubing. So we'll have adjustment so we can slide it back to tighten up the luff of the sail, or slide it forwards to loosen the luff of the sail. So you want to be able to adjust it both ways. Around the grommet, underneath the line coming into the grommet, and then reverse and back around the grommet the other way, and then we'll tie to the line coming into the grommet, same as we did on the other grommet. So around, and that's around the periphery of the grommet, then underneath the line coming into the grommet, and tie a 1/2 hitch here. And you want this fairly tight. You don't need a whole lot of adjustment. The luff, the luff is either tight or loose. It's just, a small amount of adjustment makes it tight, and a small amount of adjustment makes it loose. But you do need some adjustment. So make sure you're not banging up against the boom vang eyelet to tighten it up. Okay. And a few knots here so things don't slide out on you. Okay. And that, that gives me enough adjustment. I can loosen it up totally, or I can tighten it so it's stretching the front edge of the sail quite tight. Okay, and pull that a little bit tighter with the pliers. Okay, that's good. And nip that off. Okay, and let's tighten up our vang adjuster again because we had that so loose. Okay, and I think we're looking good, aren't we? We've got all our adjustment lines. We can flatten our sail for heavy air. We can, by pulling the clew out tight, look how flat that is versus nice wing shape. We can flatten it for heavy air. In heavy air, one of the reasons for having things flat is because the sails will stretch and create shape. Because the wind, the wind in the sail will fill the sail and stretch it a little bit. So you start as flat as possible, and you've got a lot of power. With it flat, you can sail really close to the wind, especially if it's a strong wind with very flat water. If you have big waves, you'll need a little bit more power and stronger winds, so you're not going to flatten your sail as much. You won't be able to point quite as high, but you can still point quite high. Anyway, and then in light air, a lot of fullness to the sail, loosen up on the luff, everything's loose, back stays loose, everything's loose. So you have as much fullness in the sails and as much power as possible. Okay, so we have now total control over the mainsail shape, and you just have to know your boat and how to tune it correctly for the different wind conditions. And it's like magic. When you get everything tuned correctly, your boat sails itself, especially upwind. It just is fast and sails itself perfectly smoothly. When it's not tuned right, it's like you have to work to get it. You have to keep trying to get it to sail upwind. I mean, it'll sail upwind, but it won't be as fast. It won't quite. You know when it's not right after a while, and you know when it's right. So it's very cool learning how to tune your sails exactly right to make your boat perform flawlessly. Okay, so that's the mainsail. Now we're on to the jib. And we're making good progress here. We'll be finished with the rigging pretty quick. Here's the forestay tube for the jib, and we have another exciting color for you for the jib here. Neon pink. This is going to be an eye-catching boat with these two colors. You won't lose it in the fleet. Which boat's mine? Well, you're not going to be confused. So let's see what the instructions. I'm trying to follow, I don't really need to follow the instructions because I know how to do this stuff. I designed it, but I'm trying to follow the instructions just so it's so as you follow the video, you can also be following the instructions and stuff. Oh, and this gets us to, the instructions get us to do the backstay next before we get to the jib. So we have to set aside this exciting color, blast of color. Get your sunglasses on, and we need to do the backstay, and then the masthead streamer. Let's do the masthead streamer first, even though it's not the next step in the instructions. Doesn't matter if we switch things around a little bit. Okay, the masthead streamer is very fast. It just wraps around the tube coming out the top of the mast, and this is an amazing double-sided tape. You could probably, in fact, Boeing probably does put half the airplane together with tape like this. Once it grabs, it doesn't let go. We tried probably at least 20 different double-sided tapes, and all of them would let go after, on hot days or after 6 months, they'd let go. This one never lets go. It's absolutely permanent. Okay, so wrap the tape around the top of the mast and get your streamer there, and then so masthead streamer, and then what was the other thing? The backstay. So we need the boat to put the backstay in. Okay, put my screw eyes and everything up here. Clear a little space for the boat. Tools out of the way, and yardstick out of the way. It's actually a 4-foot yardstick. Not a yardstick anymore. Okay, and here's the boat, beautiful T37 hull. Most people probably would have glued the keel in by now, but on this boat I'm going to glue the keel in afterwards. Okay, so everything moves really easily. That's beautiful. So 66 inches for the backstay. And we'll just tie it to the screw eye at the top of the mast and the back side of the mast. A couple of half hitches, so well, better do 4 of them. And 4. Okay. I'll tighten that up with pliers later on. We need a screw eye in the back deck here. And that actually needs to be an open screw eye, so we'll open that with the needle nose pliers. And we can come down now to deck level. Okay. So we'll just pry this open with needle nose pliers. You can push it against a piece of wood if you need to. Okay, and I'm going to dip the screw eye. I think we have some epoxy left over. I'm just going to dip the threads of the screw eye in the epoxy that we have left over. Maybe we'll get that in here again. Okay, the screw is in. And then I think it's we use a small rigging eye and a big rigging eye and a bowsy. Yeah, it's kind of the same as what we've been doing. Yeah, you have to find those bowsies are elusive. I had the right number here. Now where'd they go? Oh, here they are. Okay. So again, the spectra goes through the big eye. I mean the eye at the big end, down through the middle eye, and then slide along the line. And then we'll tie in a, we're doing a 4-to-1 again here. So slide the bowsy up out of the way. We can position it better later. Okay, so bowsy's up out of the way. And then we are going to tie in measure up about 3 inches above the, we have enough? Yeah, maybe, yeah, 2.5 or 3 inches above the screw eye in the back deck, and tie one of the little rigging eyes into the spectra. So we can do our 4 to 1. Ah, I lost it. Make sure you don't pull. If you lose the eyelet, don't pull your spectra knot tight, because it'll be hard to get out. You might have to use a needle to get the knot out if you pull it tight. So if you lose the eyelet, just stop pulling it tight. Okay, now it's around the periphery, if I can hold it there. Okay, so we have the eyelet tied in there. A little hard to see these little things, I know. And we'll do another loop. Okay, that's 2 knots. We'll do one more, 3rd knot. Okay, and then we're going to go through one of the larger rigging eyes, one of the 1/4 inch rigging eyes. See, I can't even hold it so you can see it. So, like that. We're just going to loop through it. We're not going to go around the periphery or tie it in. We're just going to loop, put the spectra through the middle of it, then back through the little eye, through the middle of it, up through the little eye, through the middle of the little eye, and at this point let's hook the big eye, rigging eye, to that screw eye in the back deck, the open screw eye in the back deck, and then we're going to go back down through that open screw eye in the back deck. Come on, through. Okay. And then we're going to go up to the bowsy, do that 3rd hole, the hole at the small end, the narrow end of the bowsy, and tie into the bowsy. Now when you tie this line, be sure you don't tie to around the wrong line here. Oh, it's a little hard to tell, isn't it? Okay, this is my line. So we're going to tie to the bowsy here. One knot, two knots, and the 3rd knot, and 3 knots. Okay, and pull those tight and slide the bowsy up just a little bit to create a little tension, but don't bend the mast way back. You want, this is pretty loose still. That's what you want. You want it to be pretty loose, just not totally floppy and sloppy. Okay, and we'll use the pliers to tighten that knot up. Hold the bowsy and pull against the bowsy with pliers. Okay, and nip that off. Okay, and we've got a backstay. Nice job there. Okay, and now the forestay. I think we're ready for the forestay, rigging the backstay. We did the streamer, and now we're ready for the jib, rigging the jib. This should be pretty easy for you now, because the jib is sort of a repeat of a lot of the same things we've been doing with the mainsail. So, rigging the jib. Okay, and again, there are different ways to proceed here, but I'll try to follow the instructions, the sequence in the instructions, more or less, moderately closely. Okay, and you may notice this boat doesn't have a Barney post. This is an older hull. I just needed to do a rig for it, and so the Barney post and the sheeting is different, but the jib, so far everything we've done is the same for this boat, and also the same for the T39 one of our newest designs. Okay, so we'll start the jib here in just a minute. More or less we've been following the instructions as far as each step in order, but we did forget one thing when we did the jib, which is fine. I thought we did it later, and it turns out the instructions have us do it earlier, so that's fine. That's the line that is going to hold the jib boom down to the deck. It doesn't, the forestay doesn't come down to the deck. Excuse me. But the jib boom is held down to the deck, and that, when you pull down on the boom a little back from the very front of the boom, that means the you can tighten the front edge of the sail, but you also tighten the back edge of the sail, so the boom can't lift up. So it works like the boom can't lift up. So it works like having a boom vang on the mainsail, keeping the back end of the boom from lifting up. If the back end of the boom lifts way up when you have it attached at the bow, then the sail billows out and loses all of its shape as soon as you let the sheet out. So for running off the wind, it's much more efficient to have the jib boom downhaul back a little bit along the boom and holding the back end of the sail from lifting up. So that step, the instructions indicate to do that earlier, and that's fine. Do it earlier or later, it doesn't really matter. We'll do it now. So it tells us to take a 24-inch piece of the Spectra line, and let's see, let's zoom out a little bit so we can see the table more and see what we're doing. Okay, there we go. So 24-inch piece of Spectra line, 2 feet. That should be about like so, 1 foot, 2 feet, and so 24 inches. We'll cut it right here, and we'll catch back up to where we're supposed to be in the instructions. This step having been done quite a bit earlier in my set of instructions, page 62. And very simple, easy step though. So the jib boom has a large rigging eye at the back and a small rigging eye at the front. We'll go through the small rigging eye, tie through the center of the small rigging eye at the front end. Don't waste a whole lot of line or else we might be short. So tie a knot fairly close to the end of the Spectra line. There's 2 half hitches, and we'll put 2 more hitches on there to make sure we don't have it slide out and come free. Okay, there's 3 half hitches and 1 more. Pull those tight. And 1 more. Oh, it's not pulling up tight. Okay, that's tight. And 1 additional one. Okay, and while we're at it, we'll just clip that off there. Okay, now we're tied to the small eyelet there on the jib boom, and then we go through a rigging eye. We don't go around the groove, we go right through the center of a large rigging eye, the 1/4-inch rigging eye. Hi. If I can get it through. Okay, through the eye, and then back through the small rigging eye on the boom, from front to back, as the eye has a directional aspect to it. And then we use a bowsy on this one, so we'll go through the first hole at the larger end of the bowsy, and then back down through the next hole on the bowsy, the middle hole on the bowsy. Okay, oops, grab that. And then slide the bowsy along so it's about 5 inches away from your lashing at the front. And then, so now we have down through the big eye, down through the big eyelet, and then back up through the small eyelet, and through the bowsy, then to the through the screw eye with brass sleeve liner at the back end of the boom, and then forwards and tie to the bowsy through that third hole. Don't tie it too loose, too tight. The bowsy will give you a fair amount of adjustment, but you do want the eyelet to be hanging down from the boom about an inch or so. So like that, tie it so the eyelet is hanging down from the boom. And position your bowsy where you think you want it, and then so you shouldn't have a whole lot of extra line here, just a little bit of extra for tying your knot. Okay. And then we're caught back up to where we're all the steps that we're supposed to have done if we followed the instructions exactly in order, which was my intention, but I missed this step. Don't miss steps in the instructions. Okay. This was a step on page 62, towards the bottom of the page in my instruction booklet. And again, we're tying 4 half hitches here to the bowsy, so we won't have it slide out. Okay, there we go. A little bit of a tail that we can clip off. Okay, and there we go. We have that eyelet hanging down about an inch, and now we are ready to add the jib. Okay, so first step on the jib is screw a screw eye into the bottom of the forestay tube, the long tube, and then slide the forestay tube up the front sleeve of the jib. Front edge of the jib, and okay, and then slide the small diameter carbon fiber tube at the front of the jib club through the screw eye at the front of the jib. Okay, and now we're ready to rig the clew on the jib, and that rigs exactly the same as the mainsail does. 16-inch, 5-inch piece of line in a loop, holding the clew, the back corner of the jib, down to the boom, and then a separate 16-inch piece of line through the clew of the jib in the same system, the 4-to-1 that we've used on the mainsail, and forwards to that sliding grommet that's the farthest back on the jib club. So just copy your mainsail, and I'm going to do that while you do it, and I'll be back to you in a minute. I sometimes say jib club. That's the same as the jib boom. We used to call it a jib club, but it's really the jib boom. Both terms are appropriate and correct. Now, last step. We have at the front we have the screw eye in the bottom of the forestay tube, and the tube is slid inside the luff of the jib, the sleeve of the jib. And now the last step is, almost the last step, is to hook the eye here, the downhole eye, to the screw eye in the deck. That's about 4 inches back from the front, or a little bit more. There, and get this out of the way. And then up to the top, we have to, this can be hard for you to see. If I set the boat on the floor, maybe it's easier for you. easier for me. I won't have to reach so high. Okay, and let's get a little bit closer here so we can see what we're doing better. And set up for about here. I think that will work. Now, the trick to getting this right is, I've done a number of them, so I can probably just do it right off. The first thing is to have the backstay so it's holding the mast straight. If I pull the mast, I can't pull the mast forwards, I can't bend the mast forwards because the backstay. But I don't want the backstay taut. It's pretty loose right now. It's just enough that I can't bend the mast forwards, but the backstay is not bending the mast back either. And so I'm going to clip the nylon forestay tube and then screw a screw eye in, an open screw eye, and hook the screw eye to the eye here. I like to use garden clippers, but you can use scissors if you want. So this is the type of clipper I like to use. It has the blade and an anvil that it comes down against instead of two blades like scissors. It just seems to me it does a little cleaner, nicer cut. Okay, and make sure everything's straight down the bottom. Oh, here's something to watch for. Now I have to show you what's happening. See, the lashing's in the wrong place. The jib boom is hitting the mast. We've got to slide that lashing so the jib boom doesn't hit the mast. Because that might have made my I'll go ahead and slide that so the jib boom is clear. That might have made my forestay the wrong length if I'd cut it before getting that correct. So, in fact, the back end of my boom was not even close to clearing the mast there. It was a lot of overlap. So I'm sliding that quite a ways along the jib boom. Okay, and now the boom is clearing the mast, and we're ready to hook up the forestay tube here, and then we'll be good. Okay. So if we clip it right about here, that should work well. Yeah, right there. Clip it right there, I think we'll be good. But as it says in the instructions, it's probably safer to clip it so you think it's a little bit too long, and then clip it again. If you clip it too short, there's there are probably a few solutions, but it's better not to clip it too short. Okay, screw the screw eye in and see if it'll hook on there, and that looks just right. It's snug, the backstay's taut, the mast is essentially straight, and we're good there. Okay, masthead streamer looks good, and so the last thing now is to hook up the sheets. So I'm looking really good, and we're almost sailing. We'll be sailing really soon. Congratulations. Okay, we'll do a little bit more, and but that's good for now. Okay, we are almost there. Just a couple of last details, and first one is tying the head of the jib up, and that just takes like a 5-inch piece of line. It'll be, maybe make it 6 inches, and tying the head of the jib up to the screw eye in the mast. So I'm just going through the top of through the eye in the top of the jib, the kringle in the top of the jib, and then through the screw eye in the front of the mast. And we'll want that tied up so the top of the jib is quite close to the screw eyes, is right up as high as the screw eyes, and that'll give us some adjustment at the bottom for the tension on the front edge, the leading edge of the jib. So yeah, so bring that right on up to the so the top of the jib is touching the screw eyes. And again, you can use the technique of getting the spectre to slide after you tie a square knot if that's easier. It probably is easier. So a couple of pairs of pliers, and we'll now slide that knot tight to bring the head of the jib right up to the screw eyes. Just a teensy bit more. There. Perfect. Okay, and then a couple more half-inch square knots on top of that, or one more square knot on top of that, so it doesn't slide back the other way. Okay, one and back the other way. Slippery stuff. Okay, and let's pull that tight. Again, so slippery it's hard to hold tight with your fingers, especially if it's short ends. And then we'll clip that off, and then I think we're almost there, except for the sheets, attaching the sheets, and we're almost finished rigging the sails here. Now we want to go back down to the bottom, and we'll make the luff tension adjustable with something that is similar to the Cunningham on the mainsail here at the front corner of the jib, so we can pull that front corner down and have a real tight front edge to the jib, or for heavy air, strong winds, or a looser front edge to the jib, whichever we prefer. This step is in a slightly different order than in the instructions. My apologies. We were trying to follow the instructions, but it doesn't really matter when the step is done. So this step is just to have an adjustment line for the very front lower corner of the jib. So it's similar to the Cunningham. It's almost exactly the same as Cunningham on the mainsail, the same line on the mainsail, and it'll adjust with this sliding vinyl grommet here. So the first step is to tie a very small, one of the very small eyelets into the end. Cut a 14-inch piece of line, tie one of the very small grommets, eyelets, rigging eyes, into the end of the line, as close to the end as is comfortable, about an inch from the end, so you have a little room to tie your knots. And that's tied in around the periphery of in the groove around the periphery of the eyelet. And again, at least three knots on that. There is a bit of load on this, so if you just tie 2 knots, it might slide out. So that's 2 knots, and tie a third one here. Okay. I'm running out of line. I'm pretty close to the end of the line here, tying my knots, but that's okay. And pull that tight with pliers, so it's not going to slide out. Okay. And then a little harder to clip it off here with a knife when it's short like that. Okay, there. And then this gets tied tight around the small diameter carbon fiber tube that comes out the front of the boom and back inside of the screw eye there that's around that small carbon fiber boom. So between the screw eye and the large diameter carbon fiber boom. Okay, and just catch that with a couple of half hitches. And we want to slide that up so that eyelet is pretty much right up against the boom. Okay, so we have the maximum possible adjustment there for the front edge of the jib. So make a loop and we can just catch that there. Okay, and I think we can slide that up even tighter just by pulling on the spectra there. Now it's right up against the back, the front end of the boom, and these knots really can't pull out. We want to do 2 knots still, but they can't pull out because they can't slide out because the eyelet is there at the end of the stopping it. And then the line comes up through the kringle at the clew and then it'll come back down and through the small eyelet that was just tied to the front end of the boom. Let's run this in the most obvious way. We're going to be heading back to the vinyl grommet, so I came through from the front towards the back, and then back to this grommet. Right, center your grommet now, so you have adjustment to loosen it or tighten it, and with it centered, everything loosens up a little bit, just inevitably. So with it centered, tie it fairly tight. Or if you can tie it loose, slide it back forwards a little bit. Okay, and tie it around the grommet. Again, catch around once, then catch the line. And here, don't go over your other adjustment line as you tie around the grommet. Go under it. Okay. And so you go around the grommet once, and then catch the line, go under the line, and reverse, and back around the grommet the other direction, and tie a series of knots to the line as it comes into the grommet. And almost there. There is enough extra spectra that if you feel you've really got something not adjusted right, you can clip it and retie and get it just the way you want it. Okay, there. And the jib boom is clearing the mast. That's important. If the jib boom's hitting the mast, that's not going to work. We have nice tension on the front edge of the jib. We can loosen that or tighten it by sliding this eyelet, the grommet, the vinyl grommet. And now it's just, we'll clip some of these lines off, and the jib can be fuller, or if we slide this back grommet forwards, the jib can be flatter for heavy air. And get some of our fingerprints off the boat now. And there, now all we have to do is attach the main sheet and the jib sheet, and we're good. Nice job on those. The jib sheet comes up through this eye here, the large rigging eye that's slashed on, and then forwards to the clip, and at the end of the jib sheet it has a small rigging eye on it, and the main sheet comes up. You can't see that part of the boat. The main sheet comes up and through the large rigging eye that's attached to the brass sliding tube, and then back to the clip on the brass sliding tube here. We're almost ready to go. The sheets on this boat are rigged a little bit differently than on your T37 because this is an older hull without the Barney posts, but I think you'll be in good shape getting your sheets on, and you'll be ready to sail soon. And it's been fun visiting with you, and these bright sails are kind of fun. Not quite as traditional though as white and white, or white and blue, or white and red. However, very visible. Okay, good to spend the evening with you of the day. This has been several hours of the day, and hope you're enjoying your progress on your beautiful boat. Okay, now we're ready to hook up the forestay to the mast up here, to the screw eye that we put into the mast through the front of the mainsail. And here's our jib, bright color. And let's first adjust the downhaul, the jib downhaul. So it's about an inch long, a little bit, between 3/4 of an inch and an inch long. And that's, then when we hook up our forestay, the forestay will be the right length. So slide the bowsy, if you can grab it, slip your little guy. Slide the bowsy so that eye is about an inch below the boom, just a little bit more. Okay, that's about right. So we've got the eye on the jib downhaul just about an inch below the boom. Maybe it's about an inch. Why don't I make it just a little bit closer? There. Okay, that looks right. Between 3/4 of an inch and an inch. See if you can see that. Yeah. There. So, oh, it's off to the side. So about 3/4 of an inch to an inch below the boom. That's about an inch below the boom. Yeah. Okay, and then hook that up to the eye. That's about 4 inches back from the front end of the boat, from the bow. And then stretch your forestay up to the screw eye in the back. Have your backstay so it's holding the it's got a little tension in it, but not very much. It's not bending the mast back at all. It's just not sloppy loose when the mast is straight. Okay, and then hold your forestay up to that eye and make a mark just short of the eye. It's better to make your forestay a little bit long, a little bit too long, and then trim it again than it is to have it too short. And I like garden pruners for this. So these work nicely. They have a blade coming down against an anvil, but scissors will work fine for this too. It's just these do a nice clean cut. And there, and then let's get I've already opened the screw eye using the needle nose pliers again to open the screw eye, just enough it'll hook on another screw eye. Let's put this in and see if we like the length. If it's too long, we can cut it shorter easily. Okay. Yeah, with a little tension on the backstay, that's pretty nice, but I don't want to bend the mast back. Let's try adjusting the bowsy at the bottom to tighten up on the jib boom downhaul, and see if that takes the slack out of the forestay. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now we'll want an uphaul on the jib. Yeah, that's looking pretty nice now. So we'll just use a piece of the heavy spectra to tie the jib up to the screw eye in the mast. And again, we'll be able to pull this knot tight with pliers after we tie it. We'll be able to shorten this loop, get the front edge of the jib nice and snug. Nice square knot there, and a couple pairs of pliers, a little bit more. And we do have the adjustment at the bottom of the jib as well, so we can fine tune the tension of the jib luff. Again, everything tighter in stronger winds, looser in light winds. Pretty much the same for tuning full-size boats, racing boats. Okay, a couple more knots on top of that, first knot, and now we're just tightening the knots. We shouldn't slide at that point. And that looks nice. Okay, and then the last thing, this is something that has been debated, but we're kind of leaning in favor of it usually. Gives you a little bit more control over sail shape, is topping lift. At the back, that goes from the eye in the front of the mast down to the eye at the back of the jib boom. So here we are with the lighter 50-pound spectra. It would be okay to use the heavier stuff, but the heavier spectra if you prefer, but the lighter spectra works fine for this. And just tying square knot here at the top, and then we'll put another square knot on top of this one. Make sure we don't have it sliding on us, or 2 half hitches be appropriate too. In fact, I'm doing a series of half hitches here. So we got 2 there, and I'll put 2 more on top. And then we'll put the bowsy on. The position of the bowsy wants to be up high enough that that the jib sheet can't swing up and catch on the bowsy. 4th bowsy or last bowsy, and we put the through the first hole at the wider end, through the middle hole, back down through the middle hole, and slide it along up the line. So it'll be at least 4 or 5 inches above the back corner of the jib boom. Okay, let's get this up where you can see it now. And we did glue the keel in, so that was nice. That went very easily. And through the eye at the back of the jib boom, and then back up to the bowsy, to the 3rd hole in the bowsy. If you put the bowsy right down just above the jib boom, you might have the jib sheet flip up when it's loose, and if the sail's luffing, it might flip up and catch on top of the bowsy. So best to have the bowsy up a little ways. It would be unusual to have that happen, but not impossible. Okay, and there's our bowsy. Let's tighten that up for a little bit of uphaul on the jib boom. There. Now you can see that loosens the leech of the jib. Now doesn't get stretched quite as tight, so we have control of the back edge of the jib. Let's see, you're seeing mostly keel, not sail. Okay, so let's go up. So now the back edge of the jib is a little bit loose. You don't want it to billow out, but you don't want the leech of the jib to be super tight either. So now we can tension the luff, the front edge of the sail, without tensioning the leech. If we want the leech tighter in stronger winds, we can release the bowsy a little bit, slide it down, and the leech will get tighter. We have complete control of the foot of the sail here. Let's see, this would be set for a light air, very full, almost 2 fingers width away from the boom at the bottom of the sail. Or for medium air, we tighten that up a little bit, so it's a little more than 1 finger wide. So that would be a little bit tighter for medium air. And for heavy air, we'd bring it so the foot of the sail is just a 1 finger width or thickness, or even less, away from the boom. Okay, so that's looking really nice now. I think we've got a really good system. We have control of the luff tension with this sliding grommet, and so every aspect of the sails, both sails, we can adjust relative to exactly what the wind is doing to have our boat perform at its fastest and best in any kind of conditions. Okay, well, last thing is get the sheets rigged, and you'll be sailing. Okay, bye now.